the Candice and Elisa show. This week, we're going to talk about a little bird that has lost its song. And this is a native Australian. There's only 300 of them left. He's the honeyeater, the regent honeyeater. And apparently, because they haven't been socializing enough, they haven't actually learned what their song is meant to sound like. So they've forgotten it. And scientists are really sad. And it is kind of alluding to the times of how we're all isolating with COVID. We'd all have to be really introspective. We're not allowed to be in society. And Candice, how do you feel about this little fact, you know?
Oh, man, that's so cute. Like, I'm just like, oh man, damn. And you're right. Like, I think we can draw so many parallels between what's happening in nature and what's happening in our personal lives, right? I've been speaking to so many people that have just started socializing again because we're on level 1 in South Africa, which basically means we're allowed to pretty much do everything except we've got to have a mask on and we still have curfew. But I remember speaking to someone and they're like, this is my first time out. And to be honest, I've got a lot of anxiety being out here with all these people. And I just thought, holy crap, right? Like how we are socializing, how our careers are shifting, I mean, for me, for example, and for you, like our careers are very much in front of people, right? I'm used to speaking to like rooms with hundreds of people in them. And now I do that, and I put that in air quotes, but I don't actually do that, right? It's all virtual. Technically, most of the time, I'm just looking at myself, speaking to myself, which I wonder, is that breeding narcissism? You know, if you're just constantly like staring at yourself, I don't know. How are you feeling?
It's really telling that we both had to do TED Talks without an audience, which is like the one part that you go, oh, that's so exciting. It's a TED Talk, I'm gonna have an audience, you know, and it's like, it's so bizarre how we're switching. And obviously, you know, it's great that we have Zoom and that we have all this different form of connectivity, but now I don't know about you, and my phone, I've got Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook, you know, it just becomes one of those things where you just want to go, okay, none of them.
Yes, exactly. I thought I was the only one. I'm so happy you said it because I find I've become so digitally sensitive. And I was thinking, like, until you mentioned it now, I was like, actually, before we got into this bubble, let's say, of COVID, I used to be so quick on WhatsApp. I used to be such a quick responder on emails, quick responder on everything, really. And now it's genuinely such an energy drain. Like I can't do frivolous chit chat on WhatsApp. Like I can't just be like, what's up? You know, like I literally scan the message. And if it's not something that is life and death, I'm just like, I don't have the mental, emotional capacity to speak to you right now. Right. And I didn't know what it was until you mentioned it. I'm like,
it's so draining. It's like, it's actually draining to have the whole of your connectivity happen through technology and to not have that actual human connection of sitting in front of someone. When you're chatting to someone, you know, sometimes, I mean, you and I come from very warm cultures, you know, sometimes you might like touch a hand or go like, oh my God. And there's kind of an interaction happening that you can't really have on the computer. So, and I mean, I just think it's so, I really, this story of the little bird that's forgotten its song, I mean, it so alludes to how many of us have lost direction throughout this pandemic. How many people have lost jobs, lost housing, lost income, lost themselves, you know, breakups, so many breakups, so many things happening. And it's been such a period of flux where you could say that, it's not that we've forgotten ourselves, but we've had to have such direct introspection and reconnection with the self, which can be quite foreign in the kind of lifestyles that we might have led before, that it does lead to a questioning of the self. Who am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Why am I here? I mean, I don't know about you, but I certainly have thought of all these things. The simple questions.
But I actually think it's incredible because I think, you know, as your beautiful company's name, Reframe, I think for me, what it's actually done is it's allowed us to reframe our realities and existence. And I don't know about you, but I think this has been actually one of the greatest times for me on an evolutionary perspective, because I feel like before I was just constantly chasing. I was constantly in the chase, in the hustle, in the movement. And I was always in this meeting, this country, that country. And now all of a sudden it like forced me to incubate and come inwards and say, who am I? Do I even like myself? What do I like? What do I want? Like, who am I outside of other people? And then who am I in context to other people? And prior to this pandemic, I'd never even thought about it. I was just like, this is who I am. And I kind of just flowed with it. And so like now discovering myself, like who I am, what I like, what I want to do, and how I relate to other people, and where I stop and where someone else begins. It's been so incredibly impactful, because now, whereas before I used to like take on every job because I'd be like, maybe this one, maybe this one, maybe this one. Now it's like I don't have the emotional or energetic capacity to do that. And so I'm more willing to sit back and be like, no, like, that does not seem like it's something that is actually going to enrich my life. It's just going to take a lot of capacity I just don't have. And so I think maybe in losing our song, that was more the collective song, what we then have the opportunity to do is create our own song, right? Maybe we don't need a community song. Maybe we need an individual song, and that's going to be different for each and every person, whether that's in your career, love, life.
Bird.
It doesn't need to be birds that flock together, right? It's like birds that fly apart.
I mean, it sounds like what you're talking about again is boundaries. It's been a time, I think, for me as well, and not just in the career field, but in the social arena, where I feel like, before it was like, I was the yes queen. It's like, yeah, we have to hang out here, and we're gonna see this friend, and then the schedule becomes like, you are never in your house. I don't know about you, but I was never home. I was just always like going here, going there, and I loved it. I did really enjoy it. But having had this chance to take the step back, you do realize how much energy you're expending, and sometimes actually some of these gatherings or some of these meetings are not actually energizing you, they're draining you. And recognizing that some of the decisions and the choices that you were making were actually depleting you from energy that was better served in a different part of your life, in your career, in your relationship, in your whatever. So it's like, it's certainly been a boundary setting time. Back to the episode that we did on boundaries, because we did say we would keep talking about boundaries. So
yeah, and we somehow landed up speaking about boundaries again, because I think it's so powerful, right? Because I mean, I've just discovered how to do this, and I've just discovered that I can say no, and it doesn't have to be a forceful or painful no. It can just be like, oh, look, like I actually don't even enjoy sushi. Why am I coming to get sushi? Or I don't, like, I mean, I love sushi, but I was just like, but that's the thing. Like you have to, because I know I'd go to these places, like people be like, let's go do Thai. And I actually don't really love Thai. Like I can eat it, but it's not something I love. And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And now I'm like, okay, cool. Like you guys go have a great time having Thai. I'm just going to chill at home, and it's cool. Like I'm not, like, I don't have that need to be like, okay, I've got to squeeze myself into. Exactly. I don't feel that obligation that I used to feel, as to like, I need to be included. I need to be this. I need to be that. And truthfully, I don't blame the people that were doing it, because they didn't know. They couldn't read my mind. And the reason they couldn't is because I didn't know, right? Like I just feel terrible afterwards, or I'd feel almost like I've martyred something, like I'm always sacrificing for you guys. But I'm like, but they don't even know that this is a sacrifice for you. They're like, they're like, oh, I thought we were just having a good time.
I felt like there was a fear of missing out, the real, FOMO. but it's like, I just had fear, what if I say no? And I feel like COVID's been like, yeah, what if you say no to everything?
And you're like, that is actually great. Like for the first time in my life, like I know, like I'm making these decisions and I'm so proud of them. And they're so tiny. Like I think I even told you the other night when we were catching up, where like I left this gathering, like I'd gone to the gathering. I didn't feel the energies. It didn't feel good with me. It started making me not feel great, like 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, great. I've come and you guys have a great night, but I'm gonna head out. And everyone's like, why are you leaving so early? You just got here. And I was like, you know what? I just don't feel like being here. So I'm gonna go home. And before, I would have never been caught dead. I would have been like, it's disrespectful, it's rude, how are they going to see you, da, 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 da. I would torture myself and sit through like 3 hours when I knew in the first 10 minutes that this is not for me, right? And now I'm just like so proud. Now I just want to do it all the time. I'm like, who wants anyone want to have a request? I can say no.
Because we've moved to a culture of addition versus subtraction in my mind. It's like before it was like you were full, and if anything you might subtract a few things because you just were at capacity, right? And now it's like, okay, I'm going to choose what I'm adding from this completely base level, right? And now you've had the time to actually step back and think how you're going to feel about that and how you feel without it. You know?
How you feel without it. That is so powerful. And, like I actually caught an episode of like this one show. It's called The Unlove Fix My Life. I'm not a fan of the show because I just think it's a little too aggressive. But I remember she just said something that actually caught my attention. And that's why I watched it. Was, as women, because obviously I'm single, but she was speaking about how often as women we tend to rush into relationships, and obviously not all women, but a lot of women. I used to do this too. We rush into relationships because we feel as though that is going to fill something within us. And so instead of taking time to say, what is that emptiness I feel needs to be filled? What is that craving I'm like searching for in another human being? She's like, we chase, we catch, and then guess what we tend to do? We want to control because we're so afraid that this individual now is going to have free will, that they're going to leave or they might whatever. And now they're filling this void in you that now you start controlling it, and you start wanting, you start becoming manipulative, and you start doing all these crazy things to keep this person instead of being like, who am I? Like, how are you going to fulfill my needs when I don't even know how to fulfill my, how are you going to make me happy when I don't even know what makes me happy, right? And I started reflecting on that. And I thought, before COVID, I thought I was a very conscious person still, and I was still doing a lot of reflection. And I think that was where I was supposed to be. But now I'm starting to date myself, and I'm like, hey, like, what is it? Like, what do I want in a partnership? Like, what is an ideal date? What is an ideal partner? What am I bringing to the table? And what would I require another individual to bring to the table? And it's been so interesting figuring that out within this, as you're saying, like subtraction, so that you can add to yourself instead of adding to everyone else, and you have no idea what you need to be like added into your cup. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I was actually reading an article this morning about breakups and how oftentimes when you go through a breakup, there's a loss of sense of self, right? Because obviously you're reflected in this person and somehow this has not jived. And then there tends to be this like desire to rekindle the thing with your ex because it would actually make you feel wholesome again in that part that you've lost, right? Even though it's generally the worst idea possible. But that strong desire, I mean, I remember my past breakups and stuff, there is a period of like, oh my God, is this a mistake? Should we get back together? Should we not? And it's a real internal battle because you are trying to decant, who you are without this person that was validating you as a human being, right? So obviously what you're saying, I mean, it is so important, not just, before you get into a relationship, but if you're coming out of a relationship or even in a relationship, that you're constantly checking in to reevaluate, is this working for me? Is this fulfilling? Touching base with your partner and going like, actually, this didn't work for me. And having that ability to communicate, and evolve, because it might have worked 5 years ago, but it might not work in 2. And that's okay, because you're meant to grow. You're not meant to enter a relationship and stall and be that same person in 50 years, which I think a lot of people expect that from their partner and expect that from themselves as well. It's like, oh, relationship, end of the fairy tale, and we're going to be the same. And everything's going to be the same. And no, people go through like midlife crises and completely rediscover themselves, change careers, realize that actually they really did care about fashion when they didn't before, like whatever it is. And that is also really important, that it's lifelong. It's not just till the milestone of getting with someone, if that makes sense.
It's lifelong. I love that. And that is so true, because I was even reflecting on the situation I was in December, where I'd projected so much onto this one individual. And a part of me was like reflecting on like, why did I feel like this person needed to be in my life? And this, like, I had this very obsessive, like you were just describing, like need for this person. I'm like, no, but like, I know this, because in my head, what I created was not the individual who was in front of me. And it was kind of like this, almost like a breaking of a narrative. And so it's almost like I was mourning the created aspect of who this person was versus the person themselves, even though they showed me, like, hey, I'm not someone who knows how to make up my mind, or I'm not someone who, is in tune with my feelings, like all those things. I'm like, but in my head, you are. In my head, you are that person. So become that person.
Always happen. Doesn't this always happen that we project? We take, oh, I like this, I like that, I like that. Great, I'm going to fill the gaps with my projections. And suddenly we have the perfect person, the perfect friend, the perfect whatever. And it's like, but no, that's not at all who this person is.
And the irony is, what you're projecting onto another person is what you feel you lack within yourself, right? And that was the most difficult thing for me to realize in this introspective period. Was I always saw him as someone who had, we creative, so our careers tend to fluctuate. And he had such stability, and he seemed like he was so sure. Every decision he made was so sure. It was so directed. It was so pointed. He always had this very singular focus in life. And I felt like I lacked that kind of stability in myself, in my core. And then when I started embodying it, and I was like, who said you're not stable? Who said you don't have decisiveness? You turn down projects all the time. You do things you want to do. If anything, you're much more free because you're not tied to anything in particular. And when you want to leave, you can leave it alone. And when I discovered that, all of a sudden, I was like, hey, that wasn't even a heartbreak. That was just, that was fun.
I will say that I really love being with someone that has more stability in their career and their life. Because even though I think, our careers have stability within the chaos, right? But there is a chaos. There's a being comfortable with the uncertainty, and just knowing that our life is uncertain, and what I have today might not be here tomorrow, and that's okay. I am okay with not knowing. There's other people that have career progression, and they know exactly where they're going to be in 10 years and this kind of thing. And, and I actually do like that my husband has a 9 to 5, because I know that in the evening he will be available, and that we can have a chat and whatever. And that in itself gives me confidence in how I relate to him. I know he'll be free on the weekend. I'm not always, which is a shame, but hey. But it's like, it is nice, and I can completely understand why there would be a draw to the opposite, because opposites also attract, right? Sometimes. Absolutely. So there's a complementing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is, one of those conversations we could have forever, because as always, that is what we do. But I think, it's so important for all of us to really be looking at our song right now and say, hey, has my song is this the song I still want to be singing, right? That is the question we should be asking ourselves, I think, during this time, and say, hey, maybe I did lose my song, but maybe it wasn't my song to begin with. Maybe it was the song I inherited from my mother, or from my fears, or from my partner. And what song do I want to create for myself? So as usual, guys, please like, share, subscribe, and also comment and let us know what you've thought about this episode. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.